Hey y'all, it's Amanda. Welcome back. Today I'm going to teach you how to learn from your losses to grow into a more skillful and confident player. So I've got a best of 3 set from last weekend's Rose Tower Spikemuth Cup tournament here, and as you can see, their team has some unusual Pokemon as well as some meta staples. Since I see 2 different fake out options from them and an overall fast team, I decided to lead with Indeedee and Hatterene so I can set up Trick Room. I also brought Landorus and Torkoal in the back to make the best use of Trick Room and deal some good damage. My opponent leads with Weavile, which likely has fake out, as well as Weezing, whose neutralizing gas ability keeps my Indeedee from setting up Psychic Terrain. Because Psychic Terrain is what stops priority moves from affecting my team, my Pokemon are now vulnerable to fake out, so I protect Hatterene and Indeedee to waste Weavile's fake out turn. Next turn, my opponent switches Incineroar in for Weavile, which isn't great since Incineroar is immune to Hatterene's powerful Psychic type move. But it allows me to use Follow Me with Indeedee and Trick Room with Hatterene to put the speed dynamics in my favor. Unfortunately, Weezing taunts my Indeedee, so it won't be very useful for the next few turns. I know that Incineroar will likely fake out my Hatterene, so I protect that Pokemon, and since my only option with the taunted Indeedee is to use Expanding Force, I use that on the Weezing and hope that it will take it out so I can set up Psychic Terrain. However, the Weezing protects, so this is overall a nothing turn. In retrospect, I could probably have predicted that protect, but I didn't want to hard switch in Lando or Torkoal, so I decided to go for the slow play approach instead. Now, since I know the Weezing likely won't protect again, I go for Dazzling Gleam with Hatterene to be able to deal some damage to the Incineroar and Expanding Force with Indeedee to try and take out the Weezing. But even better, the Weezing switches out into Weavile and allows my Psychic Terrain to go up and my Dazzling Gleam to deal super effective damage. Again, I probably could have predicted that they would switch out their Weezing for a Pokemon immune to Indeedee's Expanding Force, but I decided to take the chance since I didn't want Torkoal or Lando to take damage after a hard switch. With 2 turns left of Trick Room and a fully useless Indeedee, I decide to Dazzling Gleam with Hatterene and risk the hard switch to Torkoal. The Weavile protects, but Hatterene gets a crit on the Incineroar for huge damage, and Throat Chop does only a little to Torkoal. Now, I have Torkoal on the field under Trick Room, so Eruption is the best move from Torkoal. I click it, and both opposing Pokemon go down without the need for Hatterene to do anything. Trick Room runs out, so the opposing Urshifu gets to go first with the Surging Strikes into my Hatterene, but since I was able to set up the Sun with Torkoal, it does very little damage. The Weezing follows up with a Sludge Bomb and Poison, which I barely survive, and because I was able to get the Psychic Terrain up earlier, Expanding Force does huge spread damage to OHKO both opposing Pokemon. Looking back at this game, the fact that I was able to force the Weezing to switch out and allow me to get both Psychic Terrain and Sun up was critical. If my Hatterene had gone down or not been able to OHKO both Weezing and Urshifu on the same turn, I very well could have lost there. Since my team worked for me in the last game, I decided to bring the same 4 Pokemon to the next game. In retrospect, I probably should have thought more about what my opponent might do to counter my leads and adjusted mine accordingly, because this game does not go very well for me. My opponent leads Weezing again to shut down my terrain, but brings Spectrier instead of Weavile. I do the same first turn here, setting up Trick Room with Hatterene and using Follow Me with Indeedee to redirect potential taunts from Weezing. And the opposing Spectrier uses Substitute, which I definitely wasn't expecting, and the Weezing taunts my Indeedee, which I was expecting. Because I know Hatterene will hit first in Trick Room, I use Expanding Force to break Spectrier's Substitute, and Expanding Force again from Indeedee to maybe finish it off. The Weezing protects as I expected it to, so I don't have to worry about hitting either of my Pokemon. However, Spectrier doesn't take much damage from Indeedee at all, and OHKOs my Hatterene with a single Shadow Ball. My opponent swaps Spectrier out for Incin, and I take the opportunity to bring in Torkoal, which will do big damage from Eruption, and use Expanding Force from Indeedee into the Weezing slot to finish it off, and allow me to set up Sun and Psychic Terrain, which will protect me from Incin's fake out. Spectrier now comes back out, and since we're still in Trick Room, I click Eruption with Torkoal and Expanding Force with Indeedee since it's still taunted for this turn. Eruption brings Incin down to berry range, and Incin uses Parting Shot to lower Torkoal's damage output. My opponent brings in Urshifu, and since Hatterene went down, Indeedee is my best counter to it. I click Eruption with Torkoal, of course, and Expanding Force with Indeedee, but my opponent swaps Spectrier out for Incin again while Urshifu uses Detect, so Torkoal does hardly any damage and Indeedee does none. Now this is where I'm in trouble. Outside of Trick Room, my opponent has the speed advantage, and I've let them effectively lower my damage output and stall out the remaining turns of Trick Room, as well as take out the only Trick Room setter I brought to this game in Hatterene. From this point, there's not a lot I can do to bring it back without getting extremely lucky and reading nearly every turn. I end up clicking Heat Wave and Expanding Force, hoping that something good will happen for me, but Urshifu and Incin double into my Indeedee with Close Combat and Throat Chop to take it out. Torkoal gets off a weak Heat Wave, leaving both opposing Pokemon on the field. In hindsight, I probably, again, could have read that they would double into my Indeedee. It is the biggest threat left on the field to them, and Torkoal would likely not take a hit, and therefore I could have clicked Eruption instead of Heat Wave. Now, without many other options, I go for Earth Power on Urshifu with Lando and Heat Wave from Torkoal, but the Urshifu uses Detect again, and Ensign goes for Parting Shot on Lando, switching to Spectre. Spectre hangs on with a sliver of health as both the Sun and Psychic Terrain fade away. And if I had even a little bit of a chance before, the battle is truly over now. I go for Heat Wave and Earth Power again, but Spectre and Urshifu double up on Landorus to take it down, while Torkoal takes out Spectre with Heat Wave and does not nearly enough damage to Urshifu. I click Heat Wave with Torkoal, but Ensign goes for Fake Out, and Urshifu takes Torkoal out with his Surging Strikes anyway. This is the tie-breaking final game of the set. As you'll see, it came down to the very last turn and a basically 50-50 read. I bring the same Indeedee and Hatterene lead, but this time I decide to bring Lilligant instead of Torkoal in the back, hoping the element of surprise and Sleep Powder will give me the edge outside of Trick Room. My opponent leads Spectre and Weezing again, while I decide to break with my past behavior and use Follow Me plus Expanding Force on the Weezing to hopefully take it out quickly. I expect the Weezing to taunt and the Spectre to sub, so this is a pretty low risk move. My opponent behaves exactly the way I expect, so my Expanding Force takes the Weezing out of the game and gives me Psychic Terrain. Unfortunately, my Indeedee is taunted and their Spectre is behind a substitute while I haven't been able to set up Trick Room. I decide not to go for it and instead hit the Spectre substitute with an Expanding Force from Indeedee and a Dazzling Gleam from Hatterene, but the Spectre protects and Ensign goes for a Parting Shot into Indeedee to bring in Urshifu. This is mixed news for me because while I'm not able to deal any damage to Spectre, I do take the Urshifu off the board without taking any damage myself. However, I still haven't been able to set up Trick Room, so I'm actually in a bad place momentum-wise. This time, I use Expanding Force on Spectre substitute and try to go for Trick Room with Hatterene, but Spectre takes out Hatterene with a single Shadow Ball, and Incineroar deals big damage to Indeedee with Throat Chop. Next turn, I use Expanding Force on Spectre and Protect on Lilligant, expecting a Flare Blitz from Incineroar, but my opponent uses Shadow Ball into Lilligant's Protect and Throat Chop from Incin to finish off Indeedee. Now I have to bring in Landorus, and I use Protect, expecting Spectre to hit it with a Shadow Ball, but Spectre uses Substitute instead, which causes Lilligant's Sleep Powder to fail. Incin hits Lando's Protect with a Flare Blitz. Overall, not a great turn for me. So, I Earth Power into Spectre to break its sub, and Sleep Powder into Incineroar to give me some breathing room. Spectre uses Shadow Ball into Lando, but it survives with just a tiny bit of HP. Sleep Powder connects, bringing us to the pivotal turn, which ended up deciding the game. Now, I expected Spectre to use Substitute again to block a Protect from Landorus and a Sleep Powder from Lilligant. So, I chose to use Earth Power on Incin with Lando and Leaf Storm from Lilligant to break the sub. Instead, the Spectre used Shadow Ball to finish my Landorus off and then went down to a Leaf Storm from Lilligant. However, with only Lilligant on the field, there was no way I'd be able to defeat Incineroar. In the end, this set-deciding battle came down to a single decision. If I had protected Landorus and used Sleep Powder with Lilligant, I'd likely have won the game and the set. But if I had done that and Spectre used Substitute, I likely would have lost. Of course, I had plenty of earlier turns to read the Substitute correctly and adjust my gameplay. If I had done that, the entire game may not have come down to that one single turn. The goal of a consistently good player should be to maintain momentum throughout the game so that fewer games hinge on the outcome of a single hard read like that. And if I had to play this game again, I would definitely respect the Substitute more and think much harder about the target of my Sleep Powders before I use the move. I'll take that valuable lesson with me into future games I play with this team and hopefully come out with more wins because of it. Let me know what you thought about this set in the comments down below. Is there anything you would have done differently that could have changed the outcome for me? And as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to see more like this. I'll see y'all later. Bye!